KELOLAND is digital first, and KELOLAND is your home for news.
High school hoops are heating up, and you've got a front row seat. This week, Sioux Falls Christian boys take on Watertown Friday night at 7. Live streamed on KELOLAND.com.
But just
a coup, essentially, attempting and inciting these insurrectionists, and continuing to do so, by the way. So that's number one. But number two, you know, if Donald Trump is so concerned about unity, there were many things he could have done along the way. So, you know, I heard somebody say he gave that speech like a hostage that had been taken, that was being made at gunpoint to say those things. We all know they aren't true. From the fact that he called out the National Guard. He didn't call out the National Guard. He did everything he could to prevent us from having the security. And I believe, and even the French intelligence and NATO intelligence is saying, that the White House either explicitly or implicitly controlled much of what happened yesterday, or to be more accurate, what did not happen in securing the United States Capitol.
And I know you were right in the middle of all of this, so thank God you're okay, but I know you were scared, understandably so. Congresswoman, good luck. Thanks so much for joining us. We're happy you're okay.
Thank you so much, Wolf.
this is CNN Breaking News.
All right, we got some more breaking news coming into the Situation Room right now. I want to go back to our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. So, Jim, what's going on?
You can see this on screen right now. The president's Twitter account has been suspended. And all you can see, if you go to @RealDonaldTrump at the moment, it says account suspended. Everything has been sort of wiped off of the social media platform. Twitter has also released a statement just in the last several minutes about this, and I could just read this to you. It says, after close review of recent tweets from the @RealDonaldTrump account and the context around them, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence. That is from the Twitter Safety Department at the Twitter social media platform. Wolf, this is obviously an extraordinary development because, as you know, one of the defining aspects of the Trump presidency has been his use of his Twitter account. He has fired people by Twitter. He has announced policy changes by Twitter. He's announced pardons by Twitter. And he has incited violence on Twitter, as we know. We saw this leading up to the events on January 6th. And Twitter is saying because of the president's potential to further incite violence, they are shutting down his account. Now, obviously, Twitter has come under a great deal of scrutiny, a lot of pressure from social media safety advocates in recent weeks, saying that the social media platform hasn't gone far enough. In recent days, we saw they took...
You deal with stress. Tips and resources at BeSafeRx. Go to...
Even healthy meals and rides to the doctor.
People up until the moment when he realized that his celebration of them had put him in a politically untenable situation.
It all makes sense, and while I appreciate the humility that you mentioned and the culpability, because you mentioned elected Republicans who are on record, they knew how bad it was, they just flipped for other craven reasons. I do think it's important as we go through this reckoning to be clear about who said what and did what and move forward. And if people are joining your ranks, fine. But let's be clear about how we got here. So that was my extra observation. Michelle Goldberg, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Still ahead, new video evidence that shows Trump fans allegedly assaulting journalists. Speaker Pelosi calling for Trump's ousting, also worried about nuclear codes. Michael Beschloss and more coming up.
Incitement and in context of the horrific events this week, we've made it clear on Wednesday that additional violations of the Twitter rules would potentially result in this very course of action. Joining us again from the North Lawn of the White House, John Roberts. John, obviously this president has used Twitter throughout his presidency. He has some 89 million followers, and now Twitter permanently suspending his account.
Yeah, you know, they cut it off for about a day and a half, Brett, and now they've cut it off permanently. And just to give you a little more context as to what's behind all of this, Twitter put out a blog detailing its decision. And in that blog, Twitter says that President Trump's statement that he will not be attending the inauguration is being received by a number of his supporters as further confirmation that the election was not legitimate, and is being seen as him disavowing his previous claim via 2 tweets for an orderly transition on the 20th. The second tweet may also serve, it says here, as encouragement to those potentially considering violent acts that the inauguration would be a, quote, safe target as he will not be attending. Further, the use of the words American patriots in earlier tweets to describe some of his supporters is also being interpreted as support for those committing violent acts at the U.S. Capitol. And a tweet that he put out earlier today about his supporters having a giant voice long into the future and that they will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form is being interpreted as further indication that President Trump does not plan to facilitate an orderly transition, and instead that he plans to continue to support, empower, and shield those who believe that he won the election. According to Twitter, plans for future armed protests have already begun proliferating on and off Twitter, including a proposed secondary attack on the U.S. Capitol and state Capitol buildings on January the 17th. So Twitter is looking at all of this, and its calculation is that what the president is saying...
Breaking news because America is on the verge of a constitutional crisis. House Democrats plan to introduce an article of impeachment against President Trump on Monday, charging him with inciting an insurrection after that mob of his supporters attacked the Capitol. 2 Republican senators now say they'll consider convicting the president if he's impeached. And in a stunning development tonight, one of those Republican senators, Lisa Murkowski, says the president should resign. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she's so worried about the commander-in-chief having access to the nuclear codes, she called the Pentagon. In a new interview with 60 Minutes, she tells our Leslie Stahl that President Trump is deranged, unhinged, and dangerous. Tonight, there's also breaking news on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. The president has just lost his biggest megaphone. Moments ago, Twitter permanently suspended his personal account. Meantime, as we come on the air, security is being beefed up for President-elect Biden's swearing in, and investigators are pouring through videos like these, stunning images showing the assault on the Capitol unfold. Well, several of those rioters have already been arrested, and a manhunt for others is underway tonight. We have a lot of new reporting as the crisis unfolds. Our team is standing by. CBS's Nancy Cordes is going to lead off our coverage.
We love you. And then overnight, calling them intruders instead, saying they defiled the seat of American democracy, that he's outraged by the lawlessness. Now saying it's a time for healing and unity. A federal murder investigation now underway for the death of a Capitol police officer, Brian Sicknick, who is now among those who died. Authorities investigating reports he may have been hit in the head with a lead pipe or a fire extinguisher. And the very difficult video now emerging just today of this officer screaming for help as he's crushed by rioters pinned between a riot shield and metal door. Also, these images showing the mob swinging pipes and throwing chemicals at police, trying to force their way into the Capitol. And now the arrests, the feds moving quickly. There is news tonight about the man in this image, Richard Barnett. His feet on Speaker Nancy Pelosi's desk. He's now under arrest and facing federal charges. And this video posted by Donald Trump Jr. drawing attention today too. The president's son showing himself, then the president, Ivanka Trump by his side, then Donald Trump Jr.'s girlfriend dancing. President Trump has been silent on the death of that Capitol police officer, and he now says he will not attend President Joe Biden's inauguration. The president-elect responding to that tonight, saying that's a good thing. Our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, leading us off.
Horrifying video of Trump supporters storming the Capitol.
We need fresh patriots for the front! We need fresh people!
Police officer crushed between a riot shield and a metal door, bleeding and screaming for help. Police in riot gear try to hold the line. The mob keeps pushing, one of them yelling out, "Grab their damn shields." Tonight, the flag over the Capitol is at half-staff in honor of an officer who died in the riot, Brian Sicknick, a 12-year veteran of the force. The vice president offered his condolences, and the White House put out a statement from a deputy press secretary, but nothing from the president himself. Trump, more isolated than ever, remained behind closed doors at the White House today, amidst growing signs for him to resign. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski was blunt. "I want him to resign. I want him out. He has caused enough damage." Democrats took steps towards impeaching him once again. They've already written an impeachment resolution, a single article for, quote, incitement of insurrection, charging Trump with willfully inciting violence against the government by urging his followers to march to the Capitol.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy today said, quote, impeaching the president with just 12 days left in his term will only divide our country more. President-elect Biden says impeachment is up to Congress, but offered a different way to remove Trump from power.
The quickest way that will happen is us being sworn in on the 20th.
In Washington, new signs of fury from the president's supporters, hounding Senator Lindsey Graham at the airport after he turned on Trump.
Lindsey Graham, you are a traitor to the country.
Today, Trump tweeted he won't attend Biden's inauguration. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she made an extraordinary call today to Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley to, quote, discuss available precautions for preventing an unstable president from initiating military hostilities or accessing the launch codes and ordering a nuclear strike. On the day of the riot, Trump praised his supporters.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
But amidst the calls for his removal, he finally denounced the thugs.
I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem.
Still on GMA today, the Washington, D.C. Attorney General said he'll investigate whether the president is legally responsible for inciting the riots.
We're going to investigate not only those mobsters, but also those who incited the violence.
And it's not just the president. He also mentioned Rudy Giuliani, who said this at the rally.
Let's have trial by combat.
And the president's son, Don Jr., who posted a censor-removed video taken backstage at the rally before the riot. The president and his children watching the crowds gather.
Hi, Ivanka.
Don Jr.'s girlfriend, Kimberly, dancing as the Trumps celebrated.
Yes, have the courage to do the right thing. Fight.
This was Don Jr.'s message to supporters before they stormed the Capitol.
If you're gonna be the zero and not the hero, we're coming for you.
So let's get right back to John Carl live at the White House tonight. And John, back to those two video messages you just reported on from the president. Of course, the first words from the president on the day of the violence after those riots seen by the nation and the world saying, we love you, we know how you feel, but go home. But then last night, amid all this talk of impeachment, he then said in that video that they were intruders, that they defiled the seat of American democracy, that he was outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. You know, which is it? And what are your sources telling you tonight? Is the president at all concerned about his own words and whether they fueled some of this?
David, I see no indication whatsoever that the president has any regret at all for his words. In fact, I am told
The very same day that we learned 140,000 Americans lost their jobs. He also weighed in on what's happening in Washington. CBS's Nicole Killian joins us from Wilmington, Delaware. And good evening, Nicole.
Good evening, Nora. President-elect Biden said he leaves it up to Congress to decide on impeachment, and the swiftest way for President Trump to go is when he takes office January 20th. And I asked him about the way forward. You have called for unity and healing in this country, but after the events of Wednesday, does that make your job easier or harder?
I think it makes my job easier, quite frankly. I've had a number of my Republican colleagues call me. Many of them are as outraged and disappointed and embarrassed and mortified by the president's conduct as I am and Democrats are. And I think, as I have said from the beginning, and I have not changed my view, my overarching objective is to unify this country.
I also asked him if Senators Cruz and Hawley should resign after leading objections to his electoral victory. He said he hopes they're just flat beaten next time they run for office. Nora?
All right, Nicole Killian there. Thank you. And we're learning more tonight about the Capitol Police officer who died of injuries from the attack. 42-year-old Brian Sicknick served his country in Iraq with the Air National Guard, only to be killed defending the Capitol. And tonight we are seeing new shocking video from the attack. CBS's Jeff Begays joins us now. Good evening, Jeff.
Nora, Good evening. First, about the officer who was killed in this melee on Wednesday. He was a veteran officer. He was responding to this mob, and that's when he went down. Now, investigators, they're still at the beginning of this investigation, but obviously they're going to use cell phone data and video from inside the Capitol to try to get the person or persons, the persons responsible. Let's look at some of this video. New video from inside the Capitol and the outside as this event was unfolding, this attack on the Capitol. And this is a video that goes pretty in-depth. In fact, it shows protesters verbally abusing officers and also ordering officers to move out of the way, to take their badge off. And in fact, it also captures the moments when Ashley Babbitt, the young lady who was killed, one of the rioters, was killed by one of the plainclothes officers as this event escalated here. And so the investigation is intensifying. Police are using these videos and the cell phone data to track down some of the people involved, and they've already made several arrests. And Nora, we're told that more arrests will come.
And Jeff, what about some of the arrests that have been made already?
Well, you may have seen the picture of the man who had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. He was taken into custody today. He is someone who went on the radio, tried to get on TV a few times, bragging about the fact that he was one of the people who broke into her office. Also, in West Virginia, a lawmaker was arrested today. He was caught on camera leading some of the mob into the Capitol building, breaking through some of the doors and windows.
Many of them leaving a digital footprint of their actions and being arrested tonight, as the FBI and Justice Department saying is there.
Number of people over the last 3 years on my podcast, and I often ask a simple question about social media, and I say, to what extent is Twitter responsible for the rise and for the election of Donald Trump? And many of them, who are pretty smart folks, say without Twitter he may not have been elected. So people who are talking about this being an astounding setback for the president, who may choose to run again. By the way, he becomes a private citizen, but there are some indications that he seeks to become the leader of the country again. And without the powerful Twitter account that he's accumulated over time, I think it's a big deal. You can ask the question, if the president says it, but it's not on Twitter, it's like a tree falling in the woods. If there's no one there, does it make a sound? And he has amplified what is already a powerful platform, meaning the presidency, I think, in a way that has never been done before. And to take that away from him, one might argue, to some degree renders him kind of mute.
If you're inside, that's good.
Of a sitting president of the United States.
Biden making it clear he thinks Trump bears responsibility for inciting the chaos. But instead of focusing on Trump's fate, he says he's focused on the challenges ahead and hitting the ground running. And on the news that Trump will not be at the inauguration, the president-elect said this.
One of the few things he and I have ever agreed on. It's a good thing I'm not showing up.
All right, Mary, so President Trump says he will not attend, but a lot of focus on the vice president as well, Mike Pence, who of course condemned the rioters long before the president did. And the vice president we all watched late that night in the Senate chamber with harsh words for the rioters. He was then applauded by both Democrats and Republicans in that Senate chamber. Any word yet tonight, will he be at the inauguration?
Well, David, Biden says that the vice president is welcome and that he would be honored to have him there, adding that he thinks it's important as much as they can to try and stick to the traditions of the transfer of power. But tonight we're told the vice president hasn't decided yet whether or not he'll attend. David.
All right, Mary Bruce tonight. Mary, thank you. Of course, all of this playing out this week as the pandemic just worsens in this country. The disturbing aerial images from Los Angeles tonight, the bodies of COVID victims placed into refrigerated storage that's now been brought in, and you'll see that in a moment. Also, reports of doctors with patients now sharing oxygen. And news tonight on the Pfizer vaccine. Is it effective against that new highly transmissible UK variant of the virus now seen here in the U.S.? And of course, the numbers tonight. The U.S. now with more than 368,000 American lives lost, more than 3,800 dead in just the last 24 hours. ABC's Kaylee Hartung on the scene in Los Angeles tonight.
Tonight, with hospital morgues and funeral homes overflowing, Los Angeles bringing in refrigerated trucks to store the bodies. Today, LA County's deadliest day.
Where we're just coming off the travel and the congregating in social settings
of the holiday season, virtually every day, another record is broke.
Los Angeles hospitals buckling.
We've taken all of our resources and tried to give them to the patient that's in the most desperate and imminent need.
Ventilators and oxygen in short supply.
They literally had the oxygen tubing and had a connector so that two patients were using basically the same oxygen flow at the same time. So resources are really low.
Because that was your best option.
That was the only option.
Paramedics telling us ambulances are waiting up to 17 hours outside hospitals because there are no beds. The mayor pleading for federal help and more vaccines.
Give Los Angeles what we need. And just as we sent doctors to New York and PPE to other parts of the country early on when they were peaking, this is our peak.
With that highly contagious variant now confirmed in 8 states, tonight some promising signs. A new study from Pfizer and the University of Texas, not yet peer-reviewed, found its vaccine likely protects against those 2 variants from the UK and South Africa.
Thinking that this is a signal day, not as important as the violence, but related to it with Twitter citing that as the reason, a signal day in the blunting of this political individual's largest platform.
It's been an enormous weapon for him, which he's abused and abused and abused. And the problem is 2 things. Number one, Twitter is instant. So if he wants to have a sudden impact on people or to move the stock market, maybe he's got friends who are investing in certain stocks that will benefit. Maybe they'll give him a kickback. I don't know if any of that is true. But it allows a president to do things like that in a way that we haven't had a medium before make it so easy. If he had done it on television, for instance, well, you have to get through a news division. If a news division like NBC News is carrying a president who's lying, they can take him off the air, and that has happened. We've seen that very much in recent times. And the other thing is that we're now coming to see that social media are not just neutral conveyor belts. They're just like publishers. You know, they have to exercise some judgment. Twitter has done some wonderful things in labeling some of the president's more dangerous lies, saying that this claim about election fraud is disputed, for instance, or something else he says may be deceptive. That label has been tried as an effort to put some limit on Trump's power on Twitter. It obviously didn't work. I think every American should be grateful to Twitter tonight and Facebook and Instagram as well for saying this person lies, he says dangerous things. They can have an impact on our society that causes people to be killed if terrorists invade the Capitol, and that this should be the equivalent of someone who is a public menace and has to be constrained.
This large oval.
The vice president is welcome to come. We'd be honored to have him there and to move forward in the transition.
President-elect talking today about the inauguration, January 20th. The president, currently, President Trump, had tweeted to all those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th, but you wouldn't be able to see that now because his account, his Twitter account, @RealDonaldTrump, has been permanently suspended by Twitter because of the risk of violence. As you look at the side of the screen there, that's what you'll see. It's pretty stark when you think about 89 million people have been following him, and he's been using that as his communication tool throughout his presidency. Let's bring in our panel. Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, Kimberly Strassel, a member of the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, and Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. Jonathan, your thoughts on this and what it means for inside the White House, what you're hearing?
Well, I've talked to President Trump about his Twitter account over the years. You know, I guess I started covering him in at the end of late 2015, and he's at various times told me he thinks it's his most powerful tool. And I think he believes that. I mean, he can circumvent the mainstream media, he can issue orders, he can, go after his enemies, he can, tweak, tag his cabinet officials if he's, like the FDA head, if he's not happy with it. So to take it away from him is a huge deal. And look, I haven't yet spoken, I've been texting with people, I haven't yet spoken to anyone who's got a direct reaction from him, so I can't tell you how he's reacted to it, but it's pretty predictable. I mean, he was already furious at Twitter and Facebook, and I think this will send him over the edge.
Kimberly, it comes as Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri is under attack for supporting the vote against the electors and kind of talking about that. He had a book deal with Simon & Schuster, Hawley did, that Simon & Schuster said is no longer. And they are saying the reason for that is because of his actions during this. Your thoughts about Twitter, Hawley, where we are in all of this?
Well, I think you need to add to this, Brett. We just got the news a couple of minutes ago that Apple intends to shut down Parler, which is the free speech equivalent and competitor to Twitter, for claiming that it doesn't do enough to police violence on its site. And I think that none of this is coincidental, coming as it is just as Democrats have taken over the Senate. And it's somewhat alarming. I think you see big tech and groups unleashed. They feel that they no longer have to worry about pushback from Republicans in the Senate or the White House on the censorship of conservative outfits. And in fact, they may even feel that there's an upside to them to sucking up to their new Democratic political masters in Congress, maybe warding off Section 230, but I think any of us out there who care about free speech, this is going to be a trend and something that's dominating the headlines in coming weeks and months we have to be on guard for.
Charles, it does come as Democrats take full control of all the committees that oversee all of these companies. And, you know, in the explanation, Twitter writes on this blog post that the tweet about not going to the inauguration, they interpret as a signal for a safe target for another attack. The use of words American patriots, they interpret to say that the people who committed the riot in the U.S. Capitol should be commended in some way. Your thoughts on this, interpreting, divining these words?
I simply don't know how to respond, Brett. I have no idea what Twitter knows or says it knows or thinks it knows. I think that if, in fact, there were some clear and present threat of violence, that would be a reason to shut down an account. But we're at this point where we just have to take their word for it. I'm very torn about this. I feel deep revulsion at the conduct of President Trump and his followers the other day, and I understand the relationship between social media and that conduct. On the other hand, as a journalist, I have great misgivings about shutting down even very ugly channels of communication because of where that might lead. And you know one thing, Brett, people aren't going to stop thinking or saying these things. They're just going to do it deeper underground.
To that
and that may be what results from this.
Sorry to interrupt you. The president-elect, talking about all of this and the election overturn or the effort for that, went in with this comment today that's gotten a lot of reaction.
Goebbels and the great lie. You keep repeating the lie, repeating the lie. Well, there was a print that when Dresden was bombed, firebombed, there were 250 people that were killed. Or was it 2,500 people were killed? And Goebbels said, no, 25,000 or 250,000 were killed. And our papers printed that. Our papers printed it. It's the big lie. People will know it's one thing for one man, one woman, to repeat the lie over and over and over again.
Senator Ted Cruz, under attack, tweeted out, his account still active, really sad, at a time of deep national division, President-elect Biden's choice to call his political opponents literal Nazis does nothing to bring us together or promote healing. This kind of vicious partisan rhetoric only tears our country apart. Jonathan, there are concerns about the violence, obviously, in the wake of what happened this week, and it's been condemned pretty much in all corners, but there is an issue that's bubbling up here.
We're lucky we didn't see a political assassination the other day. I mean, I still, and one of my goals in reporting for the next couple of weeks is to figure out how this happened, how we saw our Capitol breached in that way. For anyone who's been inside that building, you know, thank God that Vice President Mike Pence could get to a safe place. Thank God that these members weren't killed, and we've got to get through this and somehow get beyond this political violence, because it's just terrifying.
Yeah, and this picture that
today, so we can help you go from savings
in his field.
triage officers will decide who gets treatment and who doesn't. Wolf?
All right, Nick, thank you very much. There's more breaking news we're following tonight. A source tells CNN that Vice President Pence has spoken by phone with the family of the Capitol Police officer who died from injuries he sustained in the riot by Trump supporters that the president himself encouraged. Another source tells CNN that U.S. attorneys are now planning to open a federal murder investigation into the death of the police officer, Brian Sicknick. CNN's Brian Todd is joining us right now. Brian, Officer Sicknick is only the fourth Capitol Police officer to be killed in the line of duty since the force was actually founded 2 centuries ago.
That's right, Wolf, and tonight the exact circumstances of Officer Brian Sicknick's death are unclear, but as the investigations ramp up, Officer Sicknick is being remembered as a hero who was working his dream job until the very end.
With flags lowered to half staff, the Capitol Hill community is reeling over the death of a respected police officer, 42-year-old Brian Sicknick. But with their sorrow, some, including members of Congress, are also expressing anger.
My heart goes out to Officer Sicknick's family. There are a lot of people who have Officer Sicknick's blood on their hands.
The way that they went out or the way that he died was unnecessary.
Capitol Hill police say Officer Sicknick was injured on Wednesday while, quote, physically engaging with protesters, that he then returned to his division office and collapsed. He died late Thursday. The youngest of 3 sons, born and raised in South River, New Jersey, Brian Sicknick is being called a hero by his family tonight. In a statement sent to CNN, the family saying he wanted to be a police officer his entire life. As a means to that end, they say, he joined the New Jersey Air National Guard. That branch says Sicknick joined in 1997, was deployed to Saudi Arabia and Kyrgyzstan, and served in a security force squadron, the Air Guard's military police. Sicknick was honorably discharged from the New Jersey Air National Guard in 2003 and joined the Capitol Hill Police in 2008. Capitol Hill Police say Sicknick most recently served in the force's First Responders Unit. One former Capitol Hill officer says the job is dangerous, even under normal circumstances.
Every day is your life is at danger. It's no promise that you're going to come home the next day or the same day that you go out. Every officer that swears in take the job very serious. Protect Congress.
Officer Sicknick and his colleagues, though by most accounts overwhelmed by the rioters, are drawing praise from members of Congress who they fought to protect.
Many of our Capitol Police just acted so bravely and so with such concern for the staff, for the members, for the capital of the United States. Many of them, and they deserve our gratitude.
We were all very fortunate that the Capitol Hill police that were there were thinking as quickly as they had. If they had automatic weapons, they could have killed hundreds of members of Congress.
Tonight, one of the men who helped prevent that horror is being remembered by his family for his empathy, his commitment to rescuing dogs, and his love of the New Jersey Devils hockey team. Brian Sicknick had no children, but lived with his girlfriend of 11 years.
Now, in its statement to CNN, Brian Sicknick's family has asked the public and the media not to make his passing a, quote, political issue. But as we've been reporting, his death will be the subject of a federal murder investigation with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Capitol Hill Police, and the D.C. Metropolitan Police taking part. Wolf?
I know those Capitol Police. I've covered Capitol Hill for a long time, and our hearts go out to his friends and his family. Brian Sicknick, may he rest in peace, and may his memory be a blessing. To our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'll be back once again tomorrow, Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern, for a special edition of the Situation Room. Also, this is important, Sunday night, please join me for a CNN special report, The Trump Insurrection, 24 Hours That Shook America. That's at 10 Eastern, Sunday night, only here on CNN. Thanks for watching. Aaron Burnett out front starts right now. Tonight, the push intensifying to impeach President Trump for inciting the deadly attack on the Capitol, and Twitter just moments ago permanently suspending the president's account. The threat from Nancy Pelosi saying if President Trump does not leave office immediately, House Democrats will take action to make him the only president in history to be impeached twice. And now the first Republican senator to say, I want him out. The president saying he won't attend Joe Biden's inauguration. We'll tell you how Biden is reacting to that. Disturbing new video inside the siege, the pro-Trump mob bashing windows of the Capitol doors, the moment an officer opens fire, killing one of the invaders, and the federal investigation launched after a Capitol officer dies from his injuries. The manhunt for the rioters, the man seen with his foot on a desk in Nancy Pelosi's office, arrested, the charges he faces. A Republican state lawmaker who live-streamed himself storming the building, and dozens more also arrested. All of it as the U.S. hits a grim new milestone. Over 4,000 COVID deaths in a single day. And the new warning, does the U.S. now have its own fast-spreading variant? The major winter storm sweeping coast to coast and paying tribute to a legendary baseball Hall of Famer.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. A history-making second impeachment could be in the cards for President Trump as soon as next week. House Democrats tonight determined to hold him accountable for fanning the deadly violence at the Capitol on Wednesday. This evening, we have new details and harrowing video of the chaos that left among the 5 dead a Capitol police officer. The president releasing a video tweet, perhaps looking to lower the heat on himself. But tonight, the calls for his ouster only grow. And not just among Democrats. We've got a lot to cover here tonight. Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker starts us off.
President Trump's chaotic tenure could take yet another dramatic turn, with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tonight saying she's preparing to impeach him for a second time if the president does not resign for inciting the Capitol Hill riot. Earlier writing, quote, if the president does not leave office imminently and willingly, the Congress will proceed with our action. Even saying she had called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to ask about, quote, preventing an unstable president from ordering a nuclear strike. And tonight, congressional officials tell NBC News 3 House Democrats on Monday are planning to introduce articles of impeachment. President-elect Biden tonight, pressed by NBC's Jeff Bennett, says he'll leave any decision on impeachment up to Congress.
He's been an embarrassment to the country, embarrassed us around the world, not worthy to hold that office.
It comes after President Trump announced he will not attend Biden's inauguration, and just hours after he tweeted a video in which he personally acknowledged defeat.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
And after earlier praising rioters who ransacked the Capitol, a shift in tone.
To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay.
Congressional Democrats say that's not enough. At least 230 are demanding President Trump be removed now, just days before his term is over. But with 2 sources telling NBC News Vice President Pence does not support invoking the 25th Amendment to remove him from office, now the calls for impeachment.
I think the American people have seen enough, and they are ready for us to do the job of impeaching this man.
Tonight, Lisa Murkowski, the first Republican senator to call for the president's resignation, telling the Anchorage Daily News, I want him out. He has caused enough damage. But Republican Senator Lindsey Graham heckled today at an airport for criticizing the president. Said another partisan impeachment would further divide the country, tweeting, it is time to heal and move on. If Speaker Pelosi pushes impeachment in the last days of the Trump presidency, it will do more harm than good. Other Republicans agreeing.
I think it's a ridiculous discussion to have. You don't have the time for it to happen, even if there was a reason.
Meanwhile, one of the president's former top aides calling for him to leave now.
Innocent Americans are dead because of the actions of that day and the lack of leadership in those critical hours.
As Biden says the president's absence from his inauguration is welcome.
One of the few things he and I have ever agreed on. It's a good thing I'm not showing up.
And moments ago, Twitter announced they are permanently suspending the president's Twitter account, saying it's, quote, due to the risk of further incitement of violence. Lester.
All right, Kristen Welker at the White House. Our Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt joins us now. Casey, Democrats were not able to get the Republican votes for removal last time around. If they attempt another impeachment, would this time be any different?
Lester, Republicans are incredibly angry with President Trump after what happened at the Capitol, and there are conversations happening about whether he should be impeached. So far, just one Republican senator, Ben Sasse, publicly saying he would consider it. But the top House Republican, Kevin McCarthy, called President-elect Biden today and urged him not to back impeachment, fearing it would inflame the situation further. With Democrats pressing ahead, a critical question is whether they have time left to impeach him. Lester.
All right, Casey Hunt, thank you. The FBI says its top priority is investigating Wednesday's rampage and the death of a Capitol police officer as new video emerged of the deadly shooting of one of the rioters. And we have to warn you, these images are pretty disturbing. Here's Tom Costello.
Tonight, video shot by a self-described civil rights activist shows the terrifying moments rioters reached the door of the Speaker's lobby leading to the House chambers. In a tense standoff, officers try to keep their cool. The crowd advances, then smashes the windows. When Capitol officers move aside to make way for a tactical team, the mob begins climbing towards and through the door. At that moment, an officer on the other side opens fire. Protester Ashley Babbitt falls to the ground, fatally wounded. The officer who fired the gun now on administrative leave. Meanwhile, at the Capitol today, the flag at half-staff to honor Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who died from injuries he sustained in Wednesday's violence. The FBI now leading the investigation. The Sicknick family says Brian is a hero, and that is what we would like people to remember. The FBI reports dozens have now been arrested for Wednesday's rampage, including 60-year-old Richard Barnett of Arkansas, photographed in Speaker Pelosi's office, charged with illegal violent entry and stealing Pelosi's mail. Also charged Lonnie Kaufman of Alabama for possession of 11 Molotov cocktails, handguns, and a semi-automatic weapon. And West Virginia state lawmaker Derek Evans, who live-streamed himself charging the Capitol. Some suspects have identified themselves as well. Josiah Colt, who climbed down from the Senate balcony, then sat in Vice President Pence's chair, says he was caught up in the moment. In a statement to KBOI TV, he says, "My actions have brought shame upon myself, my family, my friends, and my beautiful country. I beg for forgiveness from America and from my home state of Idaho." Former Midland, Texas mayoral candidate Jenny Cudd posted her own video.
We did break down the Nancy Pelosi's office door, and somebody stole her gavel.
Nationwide, hundreds of federal agents are pursuing riot suspects. Among the felony charges they could face, felony rioting, federal assault and murder charges, obstruction of Congress, destruction of congressional documents, conspiracy and insurrection. Tim Gallagher is the former FBI special agent in charge in D.C.
This is an act of domestic terrorism. So this is what the FBI will be focused on 24/7 to both looking backwards, lock up lawbreakers, and looking forward to help keeping this city and keeping America secure.
The FBI says every field office is working on this, agents all over the country. In addition, it says that if individuals are charged, they could still face more charges in the weeks and months ahead as thousands of tips pour in. Lester?
All right, Tom, thanks. An alarming new report from the White House COVID task force, which says there could be a new and more contagious variant that's driving the spread. It comes as records are being shattered yet again. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
Tonight, the Christmas surge is here as we witness the darkest days of the pandemic. For a second consecutive day, a record number of Americans have become infected and lost their lives to COVID. The single-day death toll soaring above the grim benchmark of 4,000.
The fact of the matter is that eventually this pandemic is going to affect each and every one of us, including your loved ones.
In California, where funeral homes are turning away grieving families, the state needs more mobile morgues. In November, 1 in 25 here tested positive for the virus. Today, that number is 1 in 5.
And now there is growing concern from the FDA that some tests used at sites like this one are reporting false negatives, perhaps leading to some unknowingly spreading the virus.
With that more contagious variant,
free. So if you haven't tried our service,
no matter which desk you sit behind, KELOLAND TV, your home for news.
Since grievances with Mike Pence as he was on Wednesday, as those that pro-Trump mob was breaching Capitol Hill, he was still complaining about the vice president back at the White House, according to several people I spoke with who had been on the phone and in person with the president. And one thing we should note on this, just to give you a sense of the reactions and how they're taking two completely different paths here. Today we were told that the vice president called the family of that slain Capitol police officer, who of course is only the 4th Capitol police officer to die in the line of duty in the 200 years since it's been a force. And meanwhile, at the White House, you notice behind me, you can see that flag on top of the White House. It's at full staff. That's not what you see on Capitol Hill, where they lowered the flags to half staff in honor of this police officer who was killed as a result of injuries that he sustained as that pro-Trump mob was attacking Capitol Hill. And the White House put out a statement that was not in the president's name. He personally did not weigh in on Twitter before his account got suspended, and they have not lowered those flags to half staff, despite us asking multiple times if they had planned to do so.
Thank you, Caitlin. I want to go to someone.
what it can't control.
Or if Mike Pence doesn't invoke the 25th Amendment, which I understand he said he didn't want to do, then I do believe the House of Representatives will impeach him, and it is absolutely necessary for the safety and the security of the country, not to say anything about accountability, which requires more, frankly, than just impeachment as well.
And that is a big deal, what you just said, the idea that there had to have been coordination, that these terrorists, these domestic terrorists were able to locate offices. They shouldn't have, as just regular people off the street, known where they were. Let me play really quickly Speaker Pelosi, who's going to have, she's taped an interview with 60 Minutes. Let me just play a little bit of it. Take a listen.
Is anybody running the executive branch of the government? Who is running the executive?
Well, sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him. But he has done something so serious that there should be prosecution against him.
Well, I gather that the 25th Amendment is off the table.
That isn't. Nothing is off the table.
Neil, let me bring you in here. We know that Speaker Pelosi is going to bring a privileged resolution on impeachment. If you could just clarify for us that I assume means they don't have to go through the committee process, meaning the Judiciary Committee doesn't have to do the hearings as they did last time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so they're trying to fast track impeachment, and obviously no final decisions have been made. But I think the House is well right in thinking impeachment right now is important. I mean, it's, I know very significant to Donald Trump personally that he's lost his precious in Twitter and so on. But really, there's something far more important has to happen, which is this person has to be removed from office. There has to be a signal sent so that future presidents don't act this way. And every person in Congress has to go on the record and say, do they stand with this thug, this, wannabe pretend dictator or not? And, the excerpt you were just showing, Joy, about Trump stoking the violence both before January 6th and on January 6th, potentially violate a number of criminal statutes, but it's certainly at the very least impeachable offenses. And Trump is all now acting surprised. I mean, give me a break. I mean, he's shocked to learn that he can be held accountable, even though he did the responsible thing to him by turning around and hiding in the White House right after he gave his speech on January 6th. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is not the way any person should behave, let alone the president.
But Neil, very quickly, I mean, you were calling for impeachment even before what happened on Wednesday, but now what we are facing is that the Obamas, the former president and first lady, the former president George W. Bush and Laura Bush, the former president Bill and Hillary Clinton will all be at the inaugural. And we're facing a situation where you just heard the Congresswoman say,
It's not clear that there wasn't coordination, whether it was just through negligence on the law enforcement side or active engagement. People that were inside of our Capitol knew exactly how to get to the Speaker's office and how to get to offices. They shouldn't have known where they were. There were people threatening the life of the Vice President of the United States while he was nearby in hiding. Is there a way to get impeachment done, not symbolically in order to punish Donald Trump or send a message, but to get him out so that he cannot run for office again, and to do it in an expeditious fashion? How fast can this happen?
100%. The resolutions, which are like the indictment, are introduced on Monday. There can be a vote on Tuesday. It can go to the Senate on Wednesday for a trial. And this is not a trial that need take very long. I mean, all the facts are in front of us. Frankly, the blood is in front of us in the U.S. Capitol. And that's, I think, all you need to know about this president.
And Congresswoman, is that what you foresee happening? You've been in these meetings with the Speaker. Is this going to be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday done fast-track process?
Well, Neil's right. It's an hour of debate with a privileged resolution. So it is very quick on the floor of the House. You know, the evidence is right there. We are the evidence. We were all there. We saw it with our own eyes. There's video of it. My guess is that the Senate could try to delay it, of course, if they don't want to, and it'll be up to people like Lisa Murkowski and others who have come out and said that they think this president needs to be removed, needs to resign or be removed. That is what is on the table for Donald Trump. He can resign. And, you know, and that, frankly, we just have to get him out as quickly as possible. You asked me if I felt safer that his Twitter account had been suspended, and of course I think that's an essential thing. But this is the man who has access to the nuclear codes. He has full and complete control of all of the intelligence agencies and all of law enforcement. Joy, the French intelligence and NATO intelligence officials have come out and advised the leaders of their countries that this was an attempted coup based on the evidence that they have seen. So I just want to emphasize how deeply unsafe we are, and we have 13 days, almost 12 days, before the next president to be inaugurated, and none of us, and I say this to you as a woman of color, none of us know if we can be safe in the Capitol, because we don't know who is protecting us and who is not. And so I think this is, and I'm not just talking about members of color, I'm talking about our staffs, I'm talking about the entire population, and then of course the country, because that's what this is about, our democracy and our Constitution.
That's absolutely the thing that is frightening.
I think video of that one lone Capitol police officer as people are storming up the stairs towards him. I'm not sure, you know, that what color the people's skin was who were running towards him mattered. He was completely overwhelmed. There was absolutely no way that he could fight back in that situation. Listen to this comment, though, by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. I want to see what you think about this. All right, so she said, I think we've got it. Do we have it?
They would have been shot. So let's be clear. We treat black people in this country and white people in this country differently. Yeah, and in fact, this one rioter was breaking a window, trying to break into the Capitol. She was warned several times, if you continue, you will be shot. Our Capitol Police held their ground, did the right thing.
I'm not sure what point she's trying to make there. What do you think?
Yeah, this is my U.S. Senator, folks. Sorry about that. Look, they did shoot somebody. She's dead. Is she happy? Is Senator Gillibrand thrilled that this protester is shot? How many more people would she want shot? And this is the same crowd that we've heard since George Floyd saying the police need to back down, they need to be defunded, they need to de-escalate. We need social workers to come in and deal with this sort of thing. And here's Kirsten Gillibrand, a woman of the left, saying, you know, open fire, gun them down. Which is it? So if she wanted people shot, all right, that's one shot. I guess maybe she wanted more dead bodies in the U.S. Capitol.
I want to ask you about your anger about what happened, because I read the pieces that you wrote about this, Troy, and I want to give you an opportunity to express your frustration over what you see as a lot of positive accomplishments of this administration that got eaten up in a big way this week.
Yeah, you know, it's been very frustrating, very saddening to me, and I'm sure a lot of other people on the right, conservatives and supporters of President Trump, to see this appalling thing happen and for it to be done by people essentially on our side. Now, obviously, it wasn't the majority of people who showed up for that peaceful rally on Wednesday and to hear the President of the United States speak, but an uncontrolled group of extremists went in and did this. And as I say, stupidly did this at the exact same time that the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate were debating objections to the Electoral College votes from Arizona, raising actual physical evidence of voter registrations that were basically approved after the statutory deadline to do so. Congress is doing exactly what those of us have been asking to do for weeks, which is to look at actual evidence of voting irregularities in the November 3rd election. And rather than sit back and let these people do so and protest peacefully outside, had they been outside for hours protesting peacefully, this would have been a great thing. They went in and shut that down, stopped that process, and then completely tarred President Trump and his 4 years of excellent accomplishments in the economy and overseas, and now there are calls for him to resign or be impeached or kicked out under the 25th Amendment. I've never seen such a staggering act of political self-sabotage in my life.
An increase, which is hard to understand their explanation.
First of all, our government, particularly our court system, which is the model in the world. Our universities, which are the model in the world, we filter reality. Yes, there's a lot of opinion.
Use theirs first against North Korea. In Indonesia, a radical Islamic cleric was released today after serving a 10-year prison sentence for funding Islamist militants. Abu Bakr Bashir was linked to the 2002 Bali bombing that killed 202 people. Supporters welcomed him back to his hometown, and police said they will monitor his activities. Bashir is now 82 and in ill health. Back in this country, major indexes on Wall Street scored a new round of record closes. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 56 points to end near 31,098. The NASDAQ rose 134 points, and the S&P 500 added 20. And Hall of Fame baseball manager Tommy Lasorda has died in Fullerton, California, of a heart attack. Lasorda led the Los Angeles Dodgers to 2 World Series titles during his 71 years with the franchise. He later became a kind of ambassador for the game. Tommy Lasorda was 93 years old. Still to come.
4343. We'll be with.
Options mean more ways to brighten your day. We source.
Try to censor it themselves in any sort of way or convince him out of some of his most outrageous tweets. So he loses that. But let's be honest here. First of all, Twitter is a private company. They can do what they want with who is on their platform. And the president, like every other president before him, still has the ability to put out press releases. He controls the whitehouse.gov website that he can put press releases out himself. He can do all kinds of things, but all of those things require him to go through actual White House channels, which is probably why he'll be pretty frustrated about
Well, and of course, he could speak live to the American people at any point. He has chosen not to do so since any of this began, right? Not in any way, shape, or form. Nick, I want to ask you about the draft article of impeachment, right? Congressman Crow was talking about it. I know you've had a chance to look at it. The Democrats are circulating it. Obviously, they need to get Republicans on board. But I want to ask you, is it the right article? Is it the right thing? Is it written right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very pointed. It goes right to his incitement of the riot at the Capitol. It goes right to what he did. I mean, this is an extremely serious crime. It just can't be understated at all. I mean, what he did wasn't just making and perpetrating and continuing a lie about having won the election and that the election was rigged, but he also incited people to violence that resulted in 4 people being murdered. Now, if you just took it outside of the impeachment process, he could be charged with felony murder.
So let me jump in there, because that's my question to you. What one does not preclude the other, but what do you think is the best way for the country? To have it be handled legally, as indeed it may be a legal thing, or to have it go through the impeachment process, which of course is, it is a political process. It is through Congress.
Right, but they're both also legal processes. The impeachment process is provided for in our Constitution, and I think that people can reasonably assume that this man is extremely dangerous. It's no coincidence that all of the current living secretaries of defense have come out in a statement warning this president not to use the military before he leaves office to further his basically false objective of trying to stay in office. There's a reason why that was done. I think every day that he stays in there, there's a danger that he could do something like that. I think the one way we have to get
Seltzer Plus Severe Power Fast Fit.
It takes you behind
office again, which I must say, a lot of Republicans are going to find that very attractive if they want to clear the way to have a real presidential election.
The process itself, though, Gloria, you know, you heard Congressman Crow. They could get a vote in the House by the end of next week, and that's moving at lightning speed for this kind of thing, right? It was 4 months for the last time. However, the House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff, right, he led the impeachment probe in 2019. He was basically saying the trial itself in the Senate wouldn't even happen under all this until after January 20th, when Biden is in office, and that could make things a whole lot more difficult for Biden, that you have this whole thing going on.
Right.
And that maybe is why Biden does not, seems at best lukewarm on this.
Right. Well, Adam Schiff is 100% right. It would be very odd to have an impeachment trial in the Senate after the president's no longer in office. Biden was completely unenthusiastic about this today. I mean, he kind of punted when he was asked the question. He said, well, you know, the Congress has got to do what the Congress has got to do. I'm focusing on my administration. But I see what you're seeing on Capitol Hill.
Off Twitter. Do you have any reporting on how that came about?
Yeah, this morning, a lot of employees met up with some executives at Twitter today. It was a meeting at Twitter, and they let them have it. They said, you know, they weren't comfortable working there if this guy was still, in fact, on their platform. And that was it. You know, I think that's a big part of what happened today. You know, on Wednesday, I was leaked some internal Slack messages from Twitter, and they said, I think fomenting a coup is a hard line. Like, we can draw a line at what's happening today. And, you know, by the end of today, that was it. You know, tonight, Twitter said no more Donald Trump on their platform.
We'll see how long that lasts. But let's take a look at what he tweeted, because I think it's important. He says, so the Ayatollah and numerous other dictatorial regimes can have Twitter accounts with no issue despite threatening genocide to entire countries and killing homosexuals, etc. But the President of the United States should be permanently suspended. Mao would be proud. Charlie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's completely outrageous. It's predictable. Twitter has been kind of building up to this moment for a couple months now. In kind of a ironic turn of events, Twitter shouldn't be banning President Trump. They should be giving him a dividend of the stock. I mean, when Twitter was 4 or 5 years ago, Twitter was $18 a share. It closed at over $50 a share, large in part because President Trump made the platform relevant again. And this is a very, very disturbing turn of events when the current president of the United States, as we are talking right now, is restricted from communicating to 88 million people. Some could argue could potentially be a national security risk. But even beyond this, this is something that the left has wanted to do for quite some time. They are using the events that no one is supporting in any form whatsoever from a couple days ago as an excuse for a massive censorship campaign that I'm afraid is not going to stop. I'm currently up on Twitter right now. I hope to continue to be, but this seems to now be a out-of-control pattern from the masters of Menlo Park that want to silence disagreement, and they got the big one.
So Steve Hilton, Twitter, you know, their argument is that the president incited the violence that we saw at the Capitol, and that this has given them the opportunity, I think they've wanted for some time, to pull the account down.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, here I am in Menlo Park. That's where I'm speaking to you from. Perhaps I should go down the road and complain directly myself. I think the issue here is that we can all agree that Twitter, Facebook, they're private companies. They can do what they want. They've clearly made a decision to weigh in on one side of the political argument. They are now clearly and unambiguously saying they are supporting the Democrats. They are anti-conservative, anti-Republican. That's what they've decided to do. Fine, they can do that. The problem is when there's no competition, when they have a monopoly over information, That's why I've argued for a long time now that we need to break up Facebook, not just through the Section 230 change that now people have come to a consensus around, but break up these companies so there's competition. And therefore, in a way, the more disturbing story today, I think, is that Apple is saying to Parler, which is an alternative to Twitter that people can use, conservatives can use, Apple is saying to Parler, we're going to kick you off unless you do what we want in terms of censoring conservatives. Now, that is really frightening. The answer to all of this is competition, and we mustn't allow Apple or anyone else to crush it.
Victor, what do you think about all this? And what do you think about the future of conservatism, of Trumpism in the United States?
I think there's a reign of fear going on, Martha. I think people in Twitter and Facebook understand that with the Senate and the House and the presidency and the hard left in control, they want to preempt that danger, and they want to have a deal with the powers that be. They're afraid the left is going to be angry at them that they even let Trump express himself. The bigger irony is that these issues were adjudicated in the 19th century when we said that railroad companies and oil companies, they were private companies, but they used the public domain, and that people needed a railroad to get from one place to another, or they needed a telegraph to communicate with another, or a telephone. And we decided that these were public utilities, and we had public utilities come in. And then these companies came in and they took over that role. You communicate through these new public utilities, except they're not public utilities.
Looking at not just, incompetent, but maybe sympathetic. And, yes, we know that some of these are sort of ordinary Joes who are sort of weekend warrioring. We've got a guy in Boise who is now saying he apologizes for storming the Senate floor. He's just some guy. You've got insurance salesmen. You've got people who, do real estate. You've got a lawmaker, West Virginia lawmaker, who was charged. He recorded himself inside the Capitol. He's the one who was hanging off the wall. He's lawyer saying he's not going to resign his office. You did have allegedly off-duty police officers flashing their badges. So these were, some of them were ordinary Joes.
Absolutely.
But they weren't all, Naveed.
That's right.
Some of these people were known QAnon leaders.
That's right. And to make it one step further, one of the senior law enforcement officials we interviewed said, look, this needs to be investigated to look at if there was a hierarchical conspiracy. There was a planning cell. There was the people who were knocking down the door and roaming through the Capitol freely weren't the only ones who organized this. So are we going to investigate those groups? I mean, look, we did a fantastic job post 9/11 in stopping international terrorists. Bin Laden didn't fly any of the planes into the World Trade Center. We had no trouble dismantling Al-Qaeda and going after ISIS. Why can't we do that here? Why does it have to be just these people and not looking at who radicalized them, who pushes the ideology, and the leadership? I mean, it's crazy.
And Ben, I mean, can they just call you? I mean, isn't there a known QAnon, a guy named Joseph Angeli who was a part of this? I mean, you have identified some of these people just on MSNBC today.
Yeah, I mean, that's him right there. He's been around in QAnon circles for a long time, and he was on, the dais in the Senate. There, as you can see right there in those pictures. But yeah, he's very available. Now, that doesn't mean don't send tips to the FBI. If you know where this guy is, call him. Please tell him. But I do want to, I want to talk about, give a little teeny bit of history here of how this happened. A couple of years ago, after Charlottesville, militias like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers said, look, we've got to be big tent. We've got to be at the front of the line, and then people can follow us in. That's quite literally what happened here. But if you had some dumb QAnon supporters who kind of believed in this sort of stuff on the internet and showed up because they liked the president, they were in this space because of that big tent. The Proud Boys opened this up, radicalized these people over the past few years, and then they wanted to pose as an army for the president. And that's just what happened.
Yeah, very clear. Maybe you should be running security in D.C. instead of the people who are doing it now. Naveed Jamali, thank you very much. Ben Collins, thank you so much for all your great reporting. And still ahead,
church. Blake told us faith helped bring them together.
Pepsi behind me, I feel free.
Of excess moisture still in the air. Aberdeen's visibility under a mile. Everybody else not doing too bad for now. Again, those are going to be changing a little bit later on. Dense fog advisory.
It is an analogy further. If we're going to get back to shore and we're going to have a really healthy economy,
not only do we have to provide relief right now, but we have to ensure that as we're rebuilding the economy, that everybody's able to participate. So hence the efforts around infrastructure. We know we have serious needs in infrastructure in our country. Investments in infrastructure are actually good investments, and they put people to work. They are foundations of growth. And so those are smart investments. We certainly don't want to just be wasting money, is to just be spending money. The strategy here is to help families get to the other side, but also to make those investments that will actually encourage growth as our economy builds back.
The refrain we hear from Republicans at the same time is that Joe Biden is going to raise taxes. Just wait for it to happen. Is that part of the plan? How much in taxes and on what income levels?
The president-elect is committed to making these investments in a smart way and recognizes that it's not just a spending spree and that we have to be mindful about how we're going to pay for some of the investments, especially those that are more permanent. And he looks forward to working with Congress and to finding those sources of revenues. There are going to be some hard choices, but these are really important choices in order for us to ensure that the economy continues to grow and to flourish for all Americans.
Much more to talk about on that, and we'll have opportunities, I'm sure, to talk about it.
Filters out leaves and debris. What? Your customer, Tom. Salesforce Customer 360 helps you focus with a single